Hi, I'm Jim Feldman and I am the Nowist. Do you know what business you're in? Are you selling stuff? Are you selling products? Are you selling services? Or are you in the problem solving and solution providing business? I'm going to show you how to think a little differently on how you approach the answer to the WIIFM, what's in it for me, from the standpoint of your customers. Let me ask you another question. What if you solved a huge problem for your client? The bigger the problem you solve, the more money clients are willing to pay. Let me distinguish the difference between a customer and a client. A client is a one-time yet. Hi, I'm Jim Feldman and I am the Nowist. And today we're going to talk about 3D thinking. Let me ask you a question. Do you understand what business you're really in? Do you sell products? Do you sell services? Do you sell stuff? Well, the truth of the matter is we are still in the problem solving business. And we are in the solution providing business. We answer the question from the standpoint of your customer. What's in it for me? To understand what's in it for me, in the next few minutes, we're going to talk about how to think and not what to think. Let me ask you a question. If you solved a huge problem for your customer, what would they pay for it? More importantly, if you solved a huge problem for your client, what would they pay for it? I distinguish a customer from a one-time purchaser and a client from somebody that bought from you more than once. Your goal is to go from suspect to prospect, prospect to customer, customer to client. In doing so, you start to build trust. And you start to understand the first premise that I am going to show you how to think and not what to think. We've all been told to think outside the box. If you're outside the box, using that metaphor, how do you know what's inside the box? You don't. If you don't know what's inside the box, how do you make an informed decision? You can't. And if you don't know what's inside the box, how do you know what the real problem is and come up with a solution? You can't. So rule number one is let's go inside the box, but I'm going to show you how to think about this new way of problem solving. We all know about a chameleon's ability to change. Think about being a chameleon for a moment. As you investigate what happens, your senses become alive. You start to think about possibilities and ask yourself, what's next? What if? What's possible? You start to think about an innovative way to apply what you've learned and how you can monetize that solution. And in doing so, you focus on implementation. So if you want to develop your IQ, get it? Okay. You investigate, you innovate, you implement. Will you change? Can you change? So we see all kinds of programs out there about changing the way you think. I believe that's very difficult to accomplish, but I focus on how to think because as you understand how to think, you can change. Let me tell you a story. While I was in law school, we had study group meetings and we'd get together and we'd go over whatever the courses were and the challenges and compare notes for the various classes. Study group was made up of some really bright people. Today, you might call those mastermind groups, but then it was called a study group because we were in law school all studying the same thing. Got a phone call from one of the guys, let's call him John, and he said, "Hey Feldman, I can't make it to the meeting. I have to go adjust a railroad car." What what does that mean? "Feldman, I have to adjust a railroad car. What's so difficult?" I don't know about you, but I don't know what adjust a railroad car meant. He goes, "Feldman, I'm an insurance adjuster. We lost the car, we paid the claim, and now I have to see what the salvage value is." Well, that really piqued my interest. I said, "John, can I go with you, buddy? I've never adjusted a railroad car." "Sure, why not? I could use the company." So when you see this big railroad car, which, as it turns out, was 60 feet long and 20 feet high and 4 feet 8.5 inches wide, it's pretty amazing to be standing there in front of it in the middle of the switching yard in Topeka, Kansas, staring at this railroad car. By the way, it was padlocked. We didn't bring a bolt cutter. We didn't bring a cutter of any kind. We had to go back. We had to borrow it, come back, find the railroad car, and cut it open. 100+ degrees outside. Neither one of us knew what to expect. While we're going through this, I keep asking him, "Tell me the procedure." He goes, "Well, when a railroad car comes into a switching yard, often the train is disassembled and some of the cars are moved north and some of the cars are moved south and east and west. And sometimes they get backed up and they move them out of the way. And because everything at the time was done on clipboards, we lost it. When it didn't get to its destination and we couldn't find it, we had to pay the claim. Now we found it." Fascinating. Fascinating. Never knew about losing a 60-foot railroad car. Now, what am I thinking at this time? I'm thinking about all the possibilities. What's inside? What's going to happen next? How can I benefit, if at all? What's in it for me? How can I make this a win-win? My mind is going crazy. We open it up and it's filled with pasta sauce. That's right. Number 10 cans of Chef Boyardee pasta sauce. And I looked at him and I said, "Now what?" John is like scratching his head. He goes, "I don't know." I said, "John, what would you take for it right now?" $5,000. "Sold." He said, "What are you talking about?" I said, "I'm going to buy it." Now, here was what was Jim thinking? I got to be able to make some money out of this. So we measured the car. And again, it was 60 feet by 20 feet by 4.8. We took out a can. We measured the can. I figured out how big a can was, how many cans multiplied by the volume, blah, 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 blah. I'll show you how I did that. But this is how I think. This is why I thought it was a good deal. So I went to the bank and I said to the bank, "I need to borrow the money." They go, "Nothing doing." I said, "I'm not leaving without a commitment." They said, "Fine, bring all your camera equipment," because I was a photographer. That's how I put myself through school. and we'll loan you the money. But we think it's a stupid idea. Okay. I ran back, I gave him the money. And the whole time I'm thinking, there's a story here. And that story that you hear right now is on page 42 of my book. Now, I'm not here trying to sell you a book, but let me tell you, if you like this story, the book is full of stories on how to think inside the box. Page 42, I tell the story of my railroad car filled with pasta sauce. So in this process, I started to say, well, what if we look inside the box? Well, the box is empty. Well, in this case, the box isn't empty. It's got a railroad car filled with pasta sauce. And in the process, I developed what I now call 3D thinking. And 3D thinking is very simple. And I'm going to explain it to you because you can use it to apply this thinking process, how to think, to solving all kinds of problems. First of all, how much pasta sauce have we got? I can tell you right now, a lot. Here's the 60-foot high roof. Here's the width, the height, the door, the this, the that, the whatever. But it works out that it'll hold about 100 tons. So I figured out how much a can weighed. I figured out how big a can was, et cetera, et cetera. And through my calculations, I figured out, rightly or wrongly, that it was 33,000 gallons of pasta sauce. Now, I might have been off a little here or there, but you get the idea. It's a lot of pasta sauce. But I bought it for $5 grand. If I can get $1 a gallon, that's 33,000. I'll clear 28,000. Not a bad afternoon, is it? I'm doing all these calculations and paid the money on Thursday, and I'm feeling pretty proud of myself. I get a phone call. Mr. Feldman, did you buy railroad car MDW 1967? Yes, I did. Move it. What? Where am I going to move it? How am I going to move it? Quite frankly, I hadn't even thought about having to move it. He said, well, you do have a locomotive. No. You do have an engineer. No. You do have a trainman. No. You do have the easement rights to go across the railroad. No. He says, what were you thinking? I said, well, you and the bank share a very similar logic pattern. I guess I wasn't thinking, but I'm a law student and I've never done this before. He said, that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard of, but it's pretty funny. So tell you what I'm going to do. Today is Friday. I'm taking off for the weekend, taking a couple personal days. I'll be back on Wednesday. Tell me what you're going to do with it on Wednesday. I need to have you move it. Have a nice weekend. Focus group. I got the focus group coming. These are bright people. I'm going to go out and I'm going to buy some beer and I'm going to buy some pizza and I am going to explain my dilemma to them and see what we come up with. And in doing so, I wanted to keep everybody on track. And so I developed this 3D thinking. And it works like this: depth, what do we know? Distance, who's going to pay for the solution? And what's our determination for getting it done? Well, knowing law students, I knew I had to come up with a pretty clear pattern. So let's define the problem. Let's gather the information and let's create the alternatives. Let's evaluate those alternatives, and then we're going to figure out how to implement it. Get it? 5 steps: depth, distance, determination. I give you a minute to write it down, to absorb it, but it's really not that complicated. First thing we're going to do is define the problem and gather the information. Okay, what do we know? We have a railroad car. It's filled with spaghetti sauce. Where was it going? So we're going to create the alternatives. We're going to evaluate those alternatives. So we started making a list. Where was it going? Military, right. Universities, great idea. Prisons and hospitals, perfect. What we were doing is focusing on large organizations that could use a lot of pasta sauce. Man, I'm feeling pretty good about that. And lastly, how about distributors, food brokers? There's my marching orders. Write down any other ideas you might have. I called the military Monday morning. I loved the idea. He says, "What's your expiration code?" I don't know. Had to get in the car, had to go find my boxcar. That took a while because they had pushed it off to the side. Cracked open, found the car, found the code, came back, called him, and he goes, "Oh, it's got about another year and a half. Tell you what I do. I give you $2 a gallon. $2 a gallon. That's $66,000. Whoa. I'm a genius." He says, "Great. All I need is one thing." "What's that?" "Your GSA number." What's that? Government services, government supply, whatever you want to call it. You have to have that number to sell anything to the government. "I don't have one." "Well, you need one." "But I don't have one." "Well, but you need one." He says, "Kid, I'm going to send you the forms. You mail it into Washington. Washington will send it back. Should be done in a couple of weeks." I said, "You don't understand. I've got a couple of days." He said, "Can't help you." Went to the hospital, needed a GSA number. Went to the university, needed a GSA number. Went to the prisons, needed a GSA number. And distributors weren't returning my calls. I'm getting a little panicked. I have wasted Monday, but I really haven't wasted it because I'm thinking about how to pivot. That's right. If I can't sell it to where it's going, how about I focus on where it's coming from? So Chef Boyardee's American Home Family Products contacted, found the product manager's office. Young lady answers the phone. She says, "He's in a meeting. This is end of a quarter. I can't help you." I said, "Well, maybe you can. I'm a grad student," which is kind of partially true. "I'm doing research," which is really true. "And I'm like doing a paper on, let's see, the cost of a commodity product like spaghetti sauce, and what it costs to make versus what it ends up costing the end user." She said, "I'm a temp. I can't help." I said, "There must be something." She says, "Well, I mean, on his desk, there's this report they just dropped off. It looks like it's the end of quarter. Maybe there's something in here." I go, "Great. Could you help me?" So she's looking through it. She's looking through it. She goes, "This says end unit cost per gallon, $3. Does that help?" I go, "Perfect. I now know it's $3 to make." I said, "Put me on hold. I'm going to wait until your guy comes back." She goes, "I don't know how long it'll be." I said, "Doesn't matter. Today's Tuesday and I really need to talk to him." "Okay. Could be a while." "Okay." I know what you're thinking. "Jim, you're crazy." We'll see. But I am certainly determined, right? Right? One of the 3 Ds, determined. Okay. I've done my discovery. Now I just need to fill in the middle blank. He gets on the phone. He says, "Well, I got to hand it to you. I've never had anybody wait 45 minutes. What do you want?" I tell him the story. He goes, "What's the product code?" I give it to him. He says, "Tell you what, I give you $1.50 a gallon. Do we have a deal?" Now, some of you are going, "Woo, woo, this is great. Feldman's going to make some money." Well, it works out to be 49.5 less 5 is 44.5. Didn't make me happy. Why not? I had to say no. Jim, are you crazy? You don't have time to negotiate, but I do. I figured I could bump him up 10%. Remember, in my mind, the military was going to pay me 66,000. He's only going to pay me 49.5. I'm short. Now you got to go with me on this, okay? Remember, I've gone through the 5 things. I've gone through the 5 things in my head, right? Here's where we're at. I asked for $1.65. So I bumped it up 10%. Now I got 54, 450. Did I agree? No. Why not? I said to him, how much for the box car? That's right. We agreed on the contents. We had not agreed on the box car. Well, it turns out that new box cars today are about $135,000. And back then, I'm going to say it was about 75. You ready? Now I'm not so crazy, am I? Accepted 30. So the gross was 84.5. More than I would have made from the military. Guy said, I'll wire transfer you the money. Fair enough. Now, this is important. If I'm grossing 84.5 and I pay the bank $5,000, I'm netting 79.45. I've gone through, exactly, I've gone through my 5 steps. But there's more. I gave 5,000 to the adjuster. So I netted 74,450. Why did I do that? Because I figured if he ever needed to go adjust another railroad car, he should be calling me. WIIFM was also WIIFM for him. Who else had given him $5,000? I gave $5,000 to the guy from the railroad. Why? Because he let me stay. And who knows, he may have other railroad cars that need adjusting. Look at my net now. 69,450. By pushing it forward and letting others share, I was ensuring that I had a future. And it wasn't a one-off customer, but I was becoming a client. I cleared 69,450, more than the military offer. I thought about how to monetize this, which is how I developed Think Inside the Box, because railroad cars are called box cars. See how to think? And I remember a quote from one of my favorite entrepreneurs, P.T. Barnum. No one ever made a difference being like everybody else. And I'm not. I don't want to be the best at what I do. I want to be the only one that does what I do. And then price is irrelevant. What's stopping you from being the chameleon? Most of us should write this down and make a copy of it. Don't let what you think you know prevent you from learning what you need to know. And to help you, here's the 3D thinking laid out in an infographic that you can print out. Take a screenshot, write it down, but learn something important here. Every tip that I give you starts off as jfa.tips. That's the way I shorten all the URLs. And then the second half after the slash mark is fairly intuitive to what I'm offering. So you don't have the difficulty of remembering or writing down these long URLs, because I focus on WIIFM, what's in it for you when it's coming from me. That's how I think. I've learned how to manage depth, distance, and determination. and share it. Here's your assignment. See a need, fill a need. Walk through the same process that I've used. Identify the need, go inside the box, employ 3D thinking, use the 5 steps if needed. It will become ingrained in you. The depth, distance, and determination can solve all kinds of problems. And to show you I'm not clowning around, hey, went to clown school, right? Every single Thursday at 11 o'clock, I have a closed Zoom call for people that have taken my course, people that have been part of my mastermind group, people that I've coached. And we do a deep dive into anything, any questions, any comments that you're having trouble with. I am the nowist. I am here to help you. This is how you reach me. I want to ensure that shift happens on your journey